Bonjour à tous.
Good evening, everybody. I'm really delighted to welcome all of you here with our two guests for many reasons. First, it's the first time for a long time that this venue has resumed with this on-site meetings, and it's really nice. They are specialists of online working and distance working, and people say that communicating ideas is very difficult if you're online, if you do it remotely. So we've been very sad so far. Second reason, it's my first meeting as a chairwoman of this venue, so I'm delighted to chair here the debates. This will be a very important meeting, and I hope that in the coming months and years we can announce new things, new events to give more place to contemporary architecture among our events. And the third reason is that tonight's guests is very impressive. You know these two practices more than I do, but I want to highlight the differences compared to what we do usually. It's not just one exhibition with presentations of objects and mock-ups from two teams, but a common installation. And tonight's debate will be held in English, except from what I'm saying just now in French, because I think it's a request from the architect. So if you need a headset, you can take one. And these two teams, I'm not going to introduce them to you, they will introduce themselves, but I'd like to highlight a few commonalities between them. First, training, although their international training course, which is Mr. Brandlhuber. He was trained in Florence and Darmstadt for Studio Muoto, Gilles Delalex, studied in Grenoble, Helsinki, Montreal, and Yves Moreau in Brussels and Göteborg. Second common point, their multidisciplinary approach, reviewing borders and people who like gusts of wind. And third common point is sharing different values, in particular the focus on something that is being trendy now and that has been recognized by the Scare Prize, but it's about reusing. And it's also about having different points of views, and that's what I've been very interested in your approach. I'm not going to dwell on, and I'm wishing you the best for this evening and the debates.
Thank you very much.
Said we'll be switching to English without any delay. Thanks everyone for being here. Thank you, first of all. Thank you to all of the team of the Cité who organizes this event every season. It's a real pleasure, and I think it's a rare and precious place in Paris to, as it has been said, discuss about ideas in a European context. So how it's going to go, I will briefly introduce first maybe myself. I'm Emmanuelle Piriou. And then I will be introducing the studios, the practices. Just give you a couple of landmarks, so that then the agendas, the philosophies, the ideas will in a way unfold as we speak. And then we'll be speaking, pretty much, but never so directly of the projects themselves, because I think you have both studios have great websites, so if you want to have a look at the projects, they are better than whatever we could put up there. So yeah, so without further delay. So I think one thing that for me unites in a certain way both of your practices is the time you've taken to set them up. So you, Muoto, started the studio in Paris in 2003. So that would be Gilles Delalex and Yves Moreau, as it's been said. after some European and non-European travels. And you've, so to say, patiently established your practice since then. Huh? So it seems that you've, yeah? Yeah, but I'm saying that because I think, and maybe the term Muoto, and if I understand correctly, it's form in Finn, but it gives the idea that maybe it gives some sort of resistance to the entropic kind of discourse, you know, mediatic discourse, but also this hyper-enthusiasm that the French architectural scene has witnessed the last 20 years, no? So, in a way, this taking the time has allowed you to develop an architecture which is not indexed to mediatic imperatives, as I was saying, or productive imperatives, but that nevertheless has been recognized through prestigious prizes, including the Nouveaux Albums des Jeunes Architectes, which is a home kind of prize in 2008, but also the Équerre d'Argent in 2016. And so your architecture works throughout scales, throughout programs, with probably kind of a pragmatic relation to economic constraints, to also, I guess you have a profound interest for urbanity and infrastructure, which you'll be talking about more, but probably urbanity as soon as the Européen 7, to which you've been participating in 2003, and which I think you've won. And then also with infrastructure, I think Gilles, you are a PhD and a teacher, and that's something you also develop in parallel to the studio. And in a way, your projects kind of bring together silos, data centers, markets, and why not even put a slaughterhouse with a pool, with a parking, and package all together. Yeah. And so paradoxically, I think B+, you're extremely young. Huh? You're emerging, an emerging practice, that's cool. So you're Berlin-based. You've been Berlin-based for some time, although you're young, because, I don't know, I kind of think of you, I picture you as the kind of last molting of a hybrid being that has multiple voices and multiple faces, no, and multiple heads, so to say, no, and probably this form that you have now is not even the definitive one. Who knows? No. So maybe I can say you are Roberta Jurcic and Arno Brandlhuber, and in a way, this plus that you have after the B is something that you, Arno, have had for quite some time with you along the way, and so these multiple voices, they go back to your first collaborations already with Sam Kelp, who himself was a former member of a famous collective, Haus Rücker Co. But also, and I will just cite a few, Julius Kraus, Bernd Kniss, and many, many others. At some point I thought I will say all the names of all the people, but then I figured, okay, we're still there tomorrow, so let's not. But you presented yourself as a disappearance specialist. I thought that was a nice way to put it. So in the ongoing process of disappearing into this B+, which is now, as I was saying, a collective, that works from a new place, I think, in Berlin. That would be the San Gimignano building, after having spent some time at Brunnenstrasse since you arrived in Berlin in 2006. And quickly, just to say that your work is very much rooted in the city of Berlin, no? in its history, in its making, in its debates also, I guess. And it materializes in many, many things, from movies to exhibitions to protests to, I don't know, publications, shows, and a TV station even. And the ongoing research, so which we'll be talking about tonight, is also very much articulated to the teaching and the research you now do at ETH, and you've been doing for some time. So I guess now we have the setting, the characters, and we can start. Maybe not, we'll start with the setting. So it's the first time at the Cité de l'Architecture in this platform that we have a proper collaboration, as it has been said. So maybe as a starter, can you say something about the setting in which we are, that you've...
Okay, I'll start. Well, first we thought, let's not do an exhibition. Let's do it together. Let's do not confront. And what can we do if we don't do an exhibition? So instead, so we thought, here we are already in great institution, and we may help a little bit. So we thought, how can we help? And I think the context of the lockdown and summer coming, we thought this is going to be like a reopening, and there maybe we can help the institution reflect on itself and exhibit itself, and there maybe we can help. And we looked around, we visited, went into the archives, and we thought maybe we can think of something of a spring cleaning, you know? Sorry, we can think of a spring cleaning, you know, when you take off the nice dishes and your nice clothes, and you know, it's a ritual, many religions. And it's a moment when you sort of step back and look at yourself, and you know, we thought we can help, but of course we don't know the institution as much as it knows itself. So we'll try to provide something, and we won't be able to choose exactly what to show. So we'll maybe just start and give the basics to start. Sorry, we give the basis to start the exhibition, and just took the shape of this grid, which was just a way to organize things. Was really a design project at first, and it took on different meanings afterwards. You know, it's not so clear what it means. We can discuss that, but we thought of it later, afterwards, even while doing it, making it, and we thought, well, it's pretty much a non-exhibition, just a way to start.
Can we please go back? No, the very first. No, again, back again, please, to the intro. Yeah.
So we thought, oh yeah, it just could be just like a map, or it could be a shelf, something where you can arrange things, organize, like a buffer zone. You have to take things out in order to bring things back in. Or it can be the symbol of the republic, the state, and as well. So it could be, it can carry many meanings in the end.
So very concretely speaking, it's this grid that has swallowed the entire space. Huh?
And maybe to add how we came into our discourse. So normally we architects are into competition. No, we try to get commissions by competitions, and we compete, and we don't like each other, and so this was also the setup here. No, there is this nice form in the back. No, this kind of how is it called? Half pipe. So half pipe. You're already cut into two. No, and then there are these two parts. No, one is fighting the other. That was let's say the kind of setting we were asked to. No, it's a very bloody, let's say, history on this kind of fighting. No, going back to Romans, and so, and then we started by Zoom, and then it turned out, they're not so bloody bastards that we could have imagined or hoped, and then it was vice versa, and one brought something in, and the next week somebody else would bring something in, and it was a kind of ping pong. And maybe that's very important, and maybe that's already one of the very first, let's say, settings. Maybe time of competition between architects is over. And it also means, let's say, when it comes to this naming, no, it's for sure I started when I was young. My first competition together with Tom Kelp was, we won the Museum of the Mankind. And then I had this hybris, no? Oh, once, if you have the first building, is the Museum of Mankind, where would it lead you to? You will get bigger than Jean Nouvel and all the other big stars of Grand Projet, no? So, and it turned out it was not the case. But then we started a lot in this collaboration, and then in the end I have to say, like maybe after this phase of I don't know what to start, but maybe of supermodels, from Kate Moss to X, and the super architects. Maybe it's also time that we get a little bit, let's say, get our names out of the game, mostly male names, and start a slightly more collaborative. And that was maybe also our start, no?
It was our start. I mean, we had this nice weekly Zoom meetings, and it was like going from one subject to the other subject. We went from the Mont Blanc to Notre Dame burning to the ZAD areas, to platforms in Sealand and stuff like that. So it was really nice talking, actually. And yeah, we were not fighting. We were discussing, exchanging. And we didn't feel like, we had to kind of oppose each other. And because we knew there was this ramp, but then the first time we came to space here, and I went, okay, but maybe we can, make it a bit bigger than just the ramp and have this face-to-face confrontation. And then it became something else, something bigger, and quite interesting that this grid kind of expands, but it also kind of reveals the existing building and the quality of the small corners. And if you go and you walk around, you go in the toilet, you will see that the grid is still expanding. And it's actually when you have this confrontations between this kind of regular grid and all the surrounding of the existing building, of the existing kind of nature, that becomes really interesting. And yes, and the office, I mean, we are two, but when we started with two, then we became three, and didn't feel like starting an office when we started working together, because we worked on projects. I mean, the first time you said it was European competitions, like, all the young students or young professionals. Okay, let's do a European. That's cool.
Over summer.
In the evenings, and then you go and work in the cafes and stuff like that. I mean, that's how you start, actually. And we went from one project to another project, but without really starting an office. I think we discussed maybe in 10 or 15 years we will start a real office. Not yet, maybe.
We thought we would pretend we were representing an office. We thought, let's come and just pretend we're working for someone else, so they take us more seriously. That was the thing.
I'm sorry, I'm trying to pass the images because there's one that I think really relates to what you were saying, which is not this one. I would like to get to the end of this thing. Anyway, because you feel very much like the super groups in the 80s, where they would bring two rock bands together and then create this super group, and it becomes this. But in a way, what I was more interested in, if this thing wants to work.
Maybe in between, while we are searching for the images, another thing in the exhibition that it's next to the grid, it's also these screens with the words, and these are the words that occurred throughout our Zoom talks. So kind of the points or the main terms that were occurring throughout different conversations you can see, and you can kind of follow the conversation from the beginning to the end throughout the screens.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. Because in a way, so the image I wanted to show you is a picture, a self-portrait of Super Studio, in which they picture themselves as travel companions. And where they, where they basically, I think the interesting questions they were posing at the time, yes. D'accord. Merci. C'est celle-là. So it feels very much, so first of all, they're all males, but there's still one woman, so I thought it was accurate for tonight. But you see that there are several of them that are recurrent in the image, because the group is not so much just a collection of the individuals. It's like a story you tell and in which you become the character. So you write yourself as an architect a little bit, no? And I think what you have, in a way, also what comes out a lot from B+ is this idea that you talk in a voice, so you're very public, you're very political even as architects, but still it's never you as a person. So it's not you as an author, you as you were saying, the star architects of some decades ago, or not so long ago eventually. But I think this becomes a very topical question also with regard to what we were saying about the difficulty of being certain types of person today in the public debate.
it's probably true that we sort of became like almost like a single office for the moment, no, of the collaboration, the discussion. We were all aware that we had to bring things. I know you proposed that we do a book. We said, oh, let's start doing a book, and maybe in the end we did. I didn't make the connection, and at the end we made a new book, and if you look at this grid, it can be, you take it as book if you like. It just depends on the content. If you look at it as a white with a book with white pages, and you can write inside the pages. I think it could be a metaphor somehow. And it's true that the same way that our own respective offices were not marked by authorship, I think it was probably much easier to melt with each other. I mean, we were very excited at the beginning, and but the positive thing is that we both had the desire to make something else. It was an opportunity. B+ is, it's a tradition to collaborate. We tend to integrate everything. The office is a small atelier, kind of. We try to make everything inside. It's very marked by the personalities of our collaborators, and so it's on a different scale. I think it's much smaller, but then we were super happy and open, and I think that's why the collaboration was, in a sense, very joyful, very enthusiastic. And I would say that this great thing is the public part. That's the last moment, the last agreement we had we had, and we are on the screens. You have some flashing words. It's a small summary of everything we talked about, but there was so much that we cannot make a summary, but we can go back on it. But there was a lot of content. I think there were too much content for to be exhibited. So in the end, we just gave the basis, the structure for it.
And then, do you want to say something about the 4G?
Yes. So then, about this collaboration, we came with the idea of combining two 2Gs into a 4G, and we have 4 different issues, let's call them like this, but this is one where we kind of separated the images and the text, and it's from one side it's a Muoto, and from the other side it's a Brandlhuber one, and this is just the image book, and the other one, it's a text one, and actually this one functions very well as in a way, a summary of all the projects, so you can flip. Each project has a short description, and then it's one photo following it. And then, by accident, because we didn't change the sides, in the middle occurred this page, which kind of, in the end, we got the pipe. It's B+ and Muoto talking to each other. But now they are collaborating in one book. Upside down, yeah.
Yeah. And maybe something I wanted to ask also, I'm sorry, maybe it's quite an abrupt second question, but here the client is an institution, right? So it's the public. It's the audience also through the institution, right? But there's always a game of power. So either here with the public or whenever you have private clients, other public clients, commissions. And I was wondering, maybe just as a very direct and harsh question, but how is it that architects can deal with power today? No? Because in a way it's inherently, it's at the very heart of our profession, no? As architects. We work for clients, or you work for clients. Huh? But there is always today this desire, and maybe it's still something that we retain from modernity, to challenge, to rephrase, to also simply react or even destroy sometimes in order to rebuild, to build better, to build differently, to reimagine the world. you've been doing this through questioning the norms, questioning property, questioning land and land distribution, for example, and in a way Muoto maybe through the build project, by how you link certain programs together, certain populations that would not necessarily be, you know, inhabiting similar spaces. So maybe as this bit of an abrupt question, is there a way in which the architect can today work with that power, along that power, against that power? I wanted to maybe...
This will probably be too long answers from both sides. Maybe we start here. So it was a versus invitation, no, to fighting each other, and then maybe we just could start with a kind of different reading of the grid. One would be the Jefferson grid, no, let's say claiming for new land just by marking the territory with this kind of grid. And for sure it's an institution here, and we would like to claim land in here. We are very, let's say, happy to be invited, that we got the chance now, this first moment that we should collaborate. But it's much better to take over the institutions, I have to say. The other would be, which is very, let's say, it was, did you see the Air Force flying by tonight? It was for this opening. Because it happened that your President Macron came along 2 days ago, and he was so fascinated by this, let's say, a layout of a possible new Grand Pochet. No, he was really fascinated when he visited you. And it was even when we were asked, no, to put even more tape in, and no, that we would see this is a kind of starting point to discuss with him, because he's not let's say, he's not in the footsteps maybe of other presidents you had before, to start a debate on architecting and, let's say, in the field of current questions, but this will be the starting point. So, and just by saying so, and maybe we can rephrase it, and we will also publish it, that he sent his Air Force for the opening and that he liked it so much. So we will claim that this is the starting point of a new Grand Pochet. But then there's something tricky about, because in our practice, for sure we started the same. I would like to have become more famous than Rem, and no, because maybe that was my hero. Now something changed, no? There was at least, let's say, at least with the last climate report, and maybe also with the leaks now of the second, let's say, part of the climate report, which was published by the Scientist Rebellion Group. And it's going back to us, no? Because for sure my favorite material, concrete, is described as a sad material in terms of sands and CO2 footprints and so on. But what does it mean? No, then the projecting is reversing the direction, because that means that we really have to work into that field and to somehow get a point into this, let's say, a footstep into that. And what I guess most of you are colleagues, no? What architects are really great in, to combine, let's say, very different, let's say, tasks to make normally a house out of it, no? But the talent we have is going much further. No, we can think things together. We are even able to produce other forms of maybe non-representation. And I give you one example, which lasted maybe in our office. It costed us the same amount of energy, time, and money than, let's say, an average building, whatever that means. So just explain it that you get an idea. So there was a moment in Berlin, they had a competition, no, for a new temporary art hall. And then we found a kind of remnant, a kind of ruin, where all the program would fit in, and it could be permanent, and it was belonging to the city. So we handed that in. It was not at the right side, no, it was not at Humboldt-Hafen, but at Humboldt-Hain, but let's say we won the competition. Then they said, okay, dear authorities, you have the ground. And then they were, oh, do we really have this ground? Oh, yes, we have. Oh, no, we sold it 2 weeks ago for nearly nothing. So this was a kind of policy in Berlin, as Berlin was poor and the Troika came, and they had to pay back. And they were selling all the public ground, also the public, let's say, inventory, which is housing, schools, which was not needed, because in that time Berlin was somehow declining. Then we said, but that's stupid, maybe, no? And then how would you deal as an architect? You can't make a building that has the argument on the property, no? So we did a campaign which was very simple. This was 8 weeks before the elections. We have the same situation now, and we handle it differently. And we just asked the party leaders of Berlin, it's also a state, kind of in the federation of the German Republic. We asked the party leaders who would, if he comes into power, go for a different practice, so not selling any longer public land and housing. And we got the letters back, no? It was like, let's say, the libertarians would say, for sure we go on with that. The conservatives would say, yes, we could think about it in future. But even to the left, they said, well, this is a very interesting point, and we would like to come back to you. Then we said, okay, if they are all telling the same, that they won't change it, how could I, if I would like to make in a representative democracy, if I would like to vote for the one who's stopping this practice? I can't, because I don't have a choice. So it's a kind of indifferent situation. And then we said, okay, the first was we published the letters. Let's say, it was also an open letter when we asked. Nobody really published it. Then we thought, okay, as architects we somehow have to deal with, somehow lines, colors. We just mixed the color codes. Now we have red, Social Democrats, red left, black, conservatives, yellow, green. And we had 2 color codes then, one is like the print one, and one is for iPhones and all the screensavers, CMYK and RGB. And then we provided those, and we printed thousands, 10,000 of posters in that color, and we gave interviews about the indifference of a political representation. And then something strange happened. So there was, the first newspaper was starting to print the political part in this. It was also very, let's say, it was a very German brown, this mixture of the color. So it was already like, so they printed the political part not in black, but in this brown. Then the next newspapers came and were just printing just the brown, whole pages. And then we delivered this kind of code to put it on your iPhone as a screensaver and the background for your computers. And then it became such a, let's say, a kind of fluent movement, and then something else happened. Then there was an elderly woman, and she said, but also my concerns about my housing price, there's no party that's dealing with that. And she got a poster, we had them all over galleries, and we provided with a little glue in the bag where you put some water in, and you could use it as a glove, and then printed on top of the election campaign posters that were everywhere, The last 4 weeks, same here. You have this nice advertising for political parties, whether they vote me. Better again vote me. But you would hardly find a real, let's say, a reason why to vote for them, It's like this kind of vague. And though this elderly woman, together with a friend, the friend was even, one was 75, one was 78, they glued it on an existing poster, and they were arrested by the police. We started it, but night times we may be faster escaping. And then the whole machinery of newspapers started. And then the activist scene in Berlin that was huge in that time, still, we're coming out of squatting scene and whatever in Berlin. They would like team up. In the end, it were like 600 around activists working on that with all their tools they had. In the end, 3 years later, the Liegenschaftsfonds, or this kind of, let's say, body they formed within the government to sell all those grounds, was closed down, and now it's no more public ground and buildings sold in Berlin. So you could say, does that make a difference, a smaller or a bigger difference, to stop this kind of practice of selling out of the public, let's say, good, or whether one building is built or not? Because it's nearly the same amount of energy, and this was, we said, okay, so maybe even as architects we are able to engage with our tools, no, not with, because we are no politicians, we have no voice normally. But we can engage in this field. And then we started to make films like property drama and collaborating with magazines, and it went to biennales. And so just to put this topic of property on the table, and then you will find out that there were old politicians that had it on the agenda 30 years ago, and you would make interviews. And so just to give one example, maybe it's not the complete answer, but to describe one practice that I would describe as architecting. No, it's not longer to this object of architecture, this, no, whatever this means, but more like a kind of doing, a kind of a verb form, no, a kind of, and we don't have a word in German, no, we have Architektur, but we don't have the verb. In English it's easy, it's architecting, even if the sense is not the same, and things also in French it's not architecture, it's not
really the same, yeah.
But there it starts, no, that we maybe in our profession we have to shift from the object to what we do, how we act, how we can provide to a kind of public discourse. That's.
And I think what you now just said is how you addressed directly, very frankly, also those who are in power and those who have actually a face, persona, no, that you can talk to. And in a way...
Maybe to add, I was not an activist before. I was, no, I'm coming from the countryside, and no, it's like coming to the city and say, huh? So, but you can still, you're not, you're all young, so even if you're the older ones, it's not too late. You can.
Yeah. So we're going to have elections in France, you know, for the president in 6-7 months. So what should we do? We as young architects for the next 6 months, we should all stop working on these stupid housing projects or commissions or whatever and kind of take over, or kind of what should we do?
No, housing is never stupid, I have to say. But that was an example, no? And you also have to make a living, and you have to go to the companies you're working for. I know there is very, let's say, normal things to do, but still maybe some drinks later and before you gain some time. And it's, I would say we could start now with a kind of new Grand Projet, no, and provide it. No, it started here. The Air Force came, it was inaugurated, and maybe then we can talk about what does all the crossings mean, no? And I think it would be possible. No, you have also experience with that. No, you did this show about Migrazioni with Superstudio, no?
Yeah.
So it was not meant as a political movement, but it came out of a certain position, no, a certain condition maybe, what it meant in that period that they could not build, and so and.
Yeah, I mean, if I have to bring it to Superstudio, but yeah, in my understanding was they had voices, and they had quite clear voices, huh? And they also, in a way, took architecture very seriously. They're always considered to have, been, doing just tales or narratives or stories, and movies also, and installations. So as something that would fascinate, yes, but also count for nothing. Well, I think in a way they were really profoundly questioning the game that the architect can play today. And for them, what for me is very striking, but this evening is not about Superstudio, but maybe something that I want to bring back to the table is the power of narratives, no? So the power of stories, the fact that, everyone knows of the birth of postmodernism in Jean-François Lyotard's words as being the end of meta-narratives, no? So we could all agree previously on narratives that would give legitimacy to our institutions, to our knowledge, to our science, and this we could agree upon because there were those narratives, no? That were religious, that were scientific, etc. And then what happens with postmodernity, with information technology, with migrazioni, so this globalization of the world and the continuous movement, is suddenly the world kind of flickers. So it becomes this kind of weather or clouds of information, of stories, of narrative elements. And what is quite striking to me is that you both, in a way, claim the importance of those narratives in very different manners, it feels. But you, Muoto, you, in a way, feel like, it feels from listening to you that you want to hold on to something that was the power of a vision, no? Of modernity, trying to reconnect to a grand narrative that could help not being on this level of just, storytelling and things.
It's absolutely possible that Lyotard was absolutely wrong. He invented, this narrative of postmodernity, which is a grand narrative, no? Isn't it? That was claiming that all other narrative had disappeared, but he invented a new one. So they've always existed, and the institution sort of the body of these grand narratives. And there's nothing to be against or pro. You don't have to be against or. It's like the air. It's like the air you breathe. We live in these grand narratives. You've got plenty of. Today, Super Studio, the search for subject, for themes that feel so actual, they're so close to us now, and they're the same. I think it's continuing. So it's true that we sort of try to reconnect to this idea that this break wasn't a break. Things were still continuing. Look, we talked about about this institution, and we say what this institution represent. It says something about publicness, about the ground where we live, the conditions of public policies and democracy, and the way we interact, and what we provide as architects are just small little models, like Super Studio did. So sometimes we do not address the institution directly. We just don't have to talk to them like this. We don't have to say what we believe. Everybody believes on something. But we can sort of instill something in every project, a little thing that says about the world we do expect to happen. And of course, we can be a little bit critical. Those projects are always slightly, clearly critical, but
you could also describe it more directly in your projects, because I can read into a kind of that there's something woven in that's not just the pure, let's say, appearance, no? So you could even give an example, I would say, to talk about one building, how it came into this.
Why it came the way it was.
And what is embedded, no? Because I think there is stories and narratives embedded, even if it's not maybe so loud as in some of our cases.
Exactly. I totally agree. There are. We were talking about ideals like utopian projects and reality, and the way the two come together, and it builds up another narrative in the end. And there's a small story and a big history. In French, it's the same word. Histoire means both history with a big H and story as a novel, as a story you hear when you're kids. So basically, for us, it's pretty much the same. There's no big and small narratives. They're all okay. The only problem we had with this, for instance. Democracy, we thought, yes, the grid is sort of a democratic model. There are many others. But you say, yes, great. But then usually when you think, okay, can we make architecture that makes us more free? Because usually architecture is supposed to lock people down. It's a means of control. But you don't want to do that, You don't want to put people in jails, You want to make people more free. So why doesn't it happen so? We're trying hard, but maybe and I think the problem is that it's just the process doesn't go the right way. It's not awful, it's conditions. Usually the buildings that came to represent the decision that was taken a long time ago. You know, it's just a representation of the power. But then you may try to think that architecture is the very moment where you try to question what democracy is about. For instance, you say, why do we want to be free? What do we want to do with it? So maybe sometimes architecture, we believe, can be the moment where you debate about what the democracy is about. You know, it should come at the very beginning of the process, should not be the end of the process, because we're just useless, you know, we're just designers, fancy designers. And here we're trying to ask about the conditions of why things happen the way they happen. You know, this exhibition is only made by 2 kilometers of black tape, but it says, what exhibition can you do, and what can the institution do? So it's a call for thinking of architecture, as you said, a pre-representative kind of architecture. Architecture before it becomes that frozen, nasty little control thing, and you know, that just looks good or bad, whatever, we don't care, it just belongs to the... So we thought, hey, can we think of architecture as something that pre-exists, you know, this, how you say, something that freezes into something just not democratic at all.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm clear, actually, I was thinking.
No, but I think that there are two things in there. So there's you wanting architecture to become a place where, you know, democracy can be discussed and can be, but there's also in the making, in the crafting, in the actual designing, no? How you make spaces and buildings, how you make buildings and movies, how you, you know, make the teaching, the TV station, the narrative of the 2038, how the people inhabit the rooftop of Saclay and how they would move around if you build Magasin 4, and, you know, so how they experience that together, what kind of, and this is different because this evades, so this is not up to you as architects, no? You can do as much as, but then it's also, there's a moment it doesn't depend on you anymore. So it's out there, it's in the wild, so to say, you know? And I was wondering, maybe, can you, maybe, if you want, if you could put into words, like the kind of lives that your projects create, no? So one thing that I think is quite striking with B+ is you've been building or rebuilding or rethinking the places in which you work, you live, but also you work and you live with other people. Huh? And so the place where you imagine when you design and where you think is also a place where it has to be political from the outset, huh? Because you're sharing that space. And so maybe can you, but then it's different as, for example, saying people watching your movies, no? There are audience, but still they get inside some sort of debate. And so I was wondering, maybe in your words, how would you talk about those lives that your projects allow?
Maybe the San Gimignano is an interesting one. It's basically like an old building that was existing. So I also think it's funny to say it's our project. It's like basically we didn't do anything. It's again coming back to the narrative. It was 2 towers that were renamed San Gimignano, and suddenly when they got this rebranding or the new narrative, they became a project, and everyone was obsessed kind of with them. And this project is also very important for the B+, because kind of the B+ was born when we moved away from Brunnenstrasse to the San Gimignano. And then also the new place, there are so many people that want to come and visit it, and then this is kind of a platform where this all new discussion happened, because, yeah, in a way, everyone wants to be engaged in striking what is it about. It's funny, I showed the photos to my parents, and they were like, we don't get it, but what did you do? And we're like, but we redid it. And they're like, it's exactly the same. Like, we don't get it at all. This is not architecture. So maybe this is like also this connotation of what architecture is and how the narrative indeed can be architecture.
Maybe to add on, it's not hosting ourselves and friends and then others come in, but then it's a kind of ongoing thing. If you once claim a kind of ugly, dirty graffiti production as San Gimignano, then it changed the whole tone. The first thing was that we got the financing for it only after naming it San Gimignano. We came with the same project to the bank that said, are you crazy guys? We will never give you money for that. Then we renamed it to San Gimignano, published it, some art magazines were printing it, and then we sent these magazines to the banks, then had a new meeting. Yeah, for sure we are investing in San Gimignano, Lichtenberg, no? So the last event we had, there was the World Mayor Conference, so even the Paris mayor was there, so from the 10 biggest cities of the world, whether this is okay or not, let's don't debate it, but they met in Berlin this time, and one of the 6, let's say, venues to meet was at San Gimignano, Berlin, no? And then they were all standing there, and then you get a completely different reputation. Then you suddenly get into touch with, let's say, decision makers, but because they know very well this revaluing by naming things, no? It's what they do all the time. But then that you can, let's say, put it into a reality that's not so banal, no? Then you know it all from the politicians. And maybe another example, it's a terrace house where, well, let's say, I don't explain it completely, but it's very narrow parts and very thick parts, so it would also have like 30-meter deep spaces with windows on both sides, so it's very dark, but very good for computers, and very thin ones that is a lot of light, and you might get a really nice teint if you stay there. But the escape way, you go out, and you can either go to the right-hand side or to the left-hand side of the terrace, and there are 2 stairs. That means you can't block your terrace off, no, because everybody has to be able to go either right or left to have the necessary 2 escape ways. What does that mean? This kind of heterogeneity that's inscribed in the project, no, let's say, money-wise, small rooms, big rooms cost more, it's clear. Social-wise, work and live, no, it's a complete mixture. And they can't close off their, let's say, their gardens, their terraces, that are also the access way into the building. So they somehow have to deal with each other, and then it's coming back. So it's not that we test it, and for sure it's sometimes difficult. Once again, they're doing a party and they don't have the gin and tonic bottles. No, the next morning starts and somebody from an institution is coming. And no, but it's not only that it has to infect yourself, but you could even put it into projects and people, it's not that all people like that, no? But people that like to live in a gated community anyhow do it already. So, and maybe it's not possible to convince them, but so this building, this terrace house, is becoming a model, an argument for heterogeneity that's embedded within the structure of a building. And it can never be changed, because the 2 escape ways, you can't change that. So now we can have lectures and experiences and stories out of that building that just come out of a certain, let's say, momentum that a specific organization of space is providing. And then we like to talk about that this argument of heterogeneity is embedded in this building, and it's resonating it. And if you now look Terrassenhaus Berlin, just Google or Instagram it or whatever, it's full. Mostly people gathering, young people smoking, whatever, on the rooftop, because if the police is coming here, they can get down like this. No, and this means, let's say, to hand over, no? Even the kind of, the narratives that they add on it might be completely different from ours, but it's always about heterogeneity. Nobody of them would build a narrative that's built on homogeneous grouping, and that makes it interesting.
And I think that's when you need to negotiate, no? So the space is what sets the negotiation process on, and I think you also have this in certain buildings where some areas are not programmed, so that they don't have a predefined use, so to say, and so one needs to negotiate for that.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about Sacré building, where indeed it's kind of it's kind of a big shelf for big spaces. Some are filled with functions, and some are still undefined. And I think at the competition they planned actually to have an exhibition space, but then we didn't have the money, so we took it away. But we left the terrace there in the middle of the shelf empty, saying, well, it's still possible to do something afterwards. And now it becomes a kind of a buffer zone for the students before they go to the restaurant. They go there and they play this kind of kicker football games and stuff like that, and they hang out there, and of course they're covered, and so if it's raining, it's okay. And I mean, it's part of the experience of the building and growing and rising up and going to the roof. And so actually we were also very happy that at the end of the construction site, I mean, we just finished the basketball courts and the building was not really open, but the students, of the neighborhood already came and played basketball. I said, okay, that we won. It's something you hope for when you design, kind of put in conditions like, yeah, but if you put a staircase, but if you make it so large, it becomes an extension of the public space. It's not like an escape route. It becomes an extension of the public ground space that you can go up. Then it kind of functions. And so it kind of invites people to go up there and to experience building vertically. And kind of freely, because they can go from one space to the other space, and they can, and the building can work in different manners and different time schedules and stuff like that, and that's what makes it quite interesting to have this confrontations of people, of users, and this circulation actually inside the building.
I think the empty spaces, the spaces that are not programmed, they sort of. And they are very defined, they're very specific spaces, they're square, get the columns, beams are strong, and they're very clear. And I think they're as clear as the stairs you did. They define conditions that forces you to start again, rethink how you want to interact with everybody. So these are the conditions to question your own way of interacting within society. So in a way, it's not exactly instilling or defining a new narrative. It's about forcing people to start reinventing their narrative, because it doesn't say exactly how you should interact, but you have to face the fact that you will have to. In the building, it happens to say that our stair is inside, so you have to go through everything before you get to the roof. So there's a kind of interaction. But here, you'd say it's more freedom, but then it's very different.
But there's something in your project that maybe you could explain a little bit. There is something between robustness and refinement.
Mm-mm.
So why did you go for that? No, because I'm sure it's not by accident.
No.
So why? How did you do that? This kind of.
How it happened?
No, this let's say this tension between the robustness and openness, but on the other hand, a very refined, let's say, parts.
Because
I like it a lot.
The moment you say. Because you think of a building usually as a whole, and here we thought it's not a whole, it's not yet done. We thought it should not be finished. By the end, if the building is done, we're going to have like a glass box, and you don't want to enter a glass box. Then let's not finish it, because something has to come after. And how do you not finish a building? That's a question.
That's leading back to your question. Do you hand it over? If somebody else would now come with a glass box or something else, something unexpected, a marijuana farm or I don't know. So would you like to be still the author, or is it free now? No, this is somehow to this question to hand over, and how much is your control, how much you start a process and then can... If we came now, could we change it?
Well, you can try to, but don't finish it, please. Do something else. Do something else. It was a story about the district itself that was growing, so it was the first sort of not the first building, but one of the first of the new projects. So we thought something else would happen, and there was already a sort of a narrative. So we thought, if we show an example of how we can, build higher and leave more space free around, and imagine a city that's coming. The difficulty is to imagine what is coming afterwards. So you don't design, but you sort of give it's a little beginning, of something else. And this beginning you have to be precise somehow. That's what you say. You have to be sometimes super precise to give a start, and then suddenly you say, "No, I'm done." And if it's like many movies in the end, that just cut like this, and you're left hanging like you didn't expect to be the end of the movie, and it leaves you in a feeling of suspension, So I think this feeling of suspension, is a bit what we were trying to reach, to go like, this is architecture. Oh, no, it's not. Okay.
This, I think, if one thought of your architectures in terms maybe of grammar, so in a way how you conjugate architecture. So now you're saying, so our architecture is what it could be. So, and you in 2038, which is the current German pavilion at the Venice Biennale, which you can actually visit because it's not there, it's elsewhere, so it's in the world, it's on internet. You have this way of going, which is you postulate 2038, and then you tell the narrative of how it went. So it's how it has been. And so, when your projects are being looked at or discussed, maybe in a bit of a kind of journalistic manner, there's always this idea, so it's abstract because it's rough, and because it's, geometrical to some extent, and then also because it's unfinished, so undetermined, because maybe you design...
No, very determined. Unfinished, very determined.
Undetermined.
You need a lot of determination. So that's why I'm saying for the stairs. The stairs are sort of going this way, but they're really going strangely this way. And the strangeness of the stairs, I think, really... freedom is never easy to reach. If you give freedom to anyone, you don't know what to do with it. But that's something. That's an experience But then to reach that experience, you need to be super precise on specific dispositives like the stairs.
Yeah. But in a way, what I find interesting is you do it in buildings that you build from scratch, and then you with B+ you go to places, and then you find in there what it could have been, no? And then it's like another possible story, or another possible future, or another possible present, but in finding the places, already what it is. I think I just wanted to have another image regarding that, which is, so there's, Gefahr by Mario Merz, which is not what is to be done now, but because there's this, for me also this other interesting idea. So we all know of La nascita di Venere, so the birth of Venice, and it's this idea of the creation. She gets out of the blue and she's suddenly this fantastic divinity, but apparently there's another story to the painting, which is it's absolutely not a birth, it's her arriving on Cyprus. So she's already born and she's already beautiful and she's already filled of power, and she has all those elements, so like all the resources in a way, that we need. And I think that's something that's quite striking for me, because, for example, you, Muoto, you speak of finding in places that have been the power to reinvent places that could be. And B+ pretty much in not only build projects, but also kind of existing situations, as you were saying, political history or regulations or norms, you find kind of the resources to produce something else. So everything is already there, no? That's something that quite strikes me. I don't know if you want to...
No, let's say There's a little discourse, then I have a question. So the first building was this Museum of Mankind, and we made it a narrative, no? That's where the Neanderthal man was once coming out of the earth, a ramp, and then it's looking to where the Neanderthal man was found. It's a very nice object, and it's a very stupid one, because the narrative is wrong. The Neanderthal man died out. It's not that he came out of the earth, and it's not our grandfathers. So, and there, when it comes to this kind of stupidness of an argument, then the object is already dead. And no, but I would like to have asked you if it's now it's very much talked about. Let's say all the debates go about caretaking, ongoing, no, a kind of ongoing process. Would you say that this building you were just describing is a kind of manifesto, that it should always be built on and caretaken, and so that what we maybe have a practice in finding something that's existing and then reusing it, that it's a manifesto for reusing? I also was asking whether the robustness, you could say the shelf, is always existing. Maybe a railing or something else would be thrown out in 20 years, but the shelf would still have the preciseness that you were describing. So would it be a manifesto for permanent caretaking? Then the next question would be about authorship, but which is a very nice way to read it. It's highly precise, but in the end, the fragile things, now we know from closes, and they change more often, no? And they have a different, let's say, circular logic.
Yeah, I think we share some kind of fascination for archaeology. Whether, I don't know which direction we go, or is it in time or within the earth, really. I mean, now you mentioned the great, like these lines you draw on top of the archaeological sites, and it's a start in order to dig into the ground, the history of the institution. And I think there is such a thing in some of our projects where you sort of dig into something that is pre-existing or that could be. I mean, I don't think there's much difference in our view between past and future. It's just elsewhere. And yes, we would like this idea of the never-ending project. As you said, the caretaking, the necessity to rethink the same object over and over and over. I think it's even part of the method, no? The way we probably work. If we could we could study a building for 10 years, we would change it for the 10 years. I mean, we don't see any necessity to stop. And I think
our clients, they don't agree. After a while, they
say, "Could you stop?
Could you stop? we want to build." But about robustness, it was a struggle actually with the engineers to keep it as robust, because they wanted to optimize and reduce the thickness of the beams and the height of the beam and stuff like that. And I think the building wouldn't have been the same if we would have listened.
No, we had to explain. Okay, this column is not this. This is different in French. We said this c'est poteau, this structural column. We pretended this is a beautiful column. Imagine it's the Acropolis, So you should keep it the way it is. You say this beam. This is not a beam. It's a suspended wall. See? You say really? You say yes, it is. Because it's useless now, but maybe it will be useful in a few years. But this it's hard to explain. Of course, that is something that is absolutely useless today may be useful. You need that because we often mention about critics about doing neutral and flexible stuff. And I have to say that flexibility, we don't really care about flexibility. It's because it's not the thing is that you cannot. It's not that you should be able to do anything. It's just that you should wish to do something. So flexibility is nothing. Is never so interesting. If you take a stupid office building, then you can do anything, but you don't do anything.
So it's desire.
It's just boring. You're just bored.
You need to desire it, huh?
Yeah. So have to give some conditions so that people forced wish to do it. You wish to climb the stairs. You want to go up. If you come from the bottom, you just no. On all the beach, I'm sorry, I didn't visit it, but you want to climb on it. It's like a small mountain, and you can't help, but you want to go to the top. And I guess it's way above flexibility. It's above everything. It's just about desire. You just want to go. No, it catches you. No?
But also, if we put it kind of in the, doesn't matter where is the urge coming from, but if we put it in the context of what's happening today with the whole climate change and that today we know that just demolish existing structure and rebuild a new one on the same position, it's not okay anymore, then also this gets another argument, no, that you built robust and this is giving a second life that can be reused for whatever means come in the future.
But what is strong in what is now being said is that, yes, it's true, it goes probably hand in hand with, let's say, sustainable or reasonable use of resources, but also it's never about problem solving. Huh? So it kind of still reclaims the poetic dimension of architecture. And also this idea that there's creation, there's invention, there's not newness because it's not about producing anything new, but so it's not only about saving the world or, isolating the house as it should be. Huh? So
if you think even of the installation here, what is beautiful is the interior project by Freaks architects. we only put the black lines, but if you look at the
painting,
the painting is great. And of course, if we only had a white black background, it wouldn't work that much. And also, you have you see the previous projects. The stones that are not so slick. And you have, as Yves you're saying, there are many accidents. So all the layers that came before make it a lot more interesting. And the grid, I think, shows more of the accidents than of itself. I think it's really another layer, and hopefully there will be more. That's for sure.
And so maybe a question I wanted to ask was about, so now I called it original choices because it's an expression that Foucault uses in an interview he gave in the 70s where he was talking about his writing. And he basically says that any area of knowledge or even any creator or inventor makes original choices. Sometimes they are within the discipline, within the area of knowledge, of culture that they already inhabit, and sometimes they are exterior, no? So what I wanted to ask is, in a way, do you think of architecture in that way, so that it stems or it springs maybe from, first of all, economic constraints or political desires or, I don't know, ecological questions, no? How do you have an origin? Do you have something that is there and kind of drives the practices? Would you say that? Or is it every project that, in a way, re-questions? Would you index your architecture to exterior questions, societal questions, political questions, ecological questions? Does that make sense? Or not, maybe? Yeah?
There's a very simple answer, yes.
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 But it comes from there first, so it's never about architecture.
No, it's a very, let's say, it's a question that's often raised. No, where is your, let's say, what's the driving force of, where does it come from? Is it about this? We would say it's not about beauty and aesthetics anymore, but nice thinking creates, you can't avoid it, nice things. So it starts with nice thinking, no? And there I'm with this old guy there, that it's all original, but you know that it's always a kind of creation in any thinking. And on the other hand, I think a lot of you might work, let's say, during studies, after studies in the office, and the labor you do there no, I can tell it from my own. That's maybe better not to tell. So my experience was I always got bad skin. After 3 months, I had to leave the office because I couldn't find this kind of origin in what I do. No, it was not even provided within the working conditions in a classical architectural office that you could really adapt to their thinking. No, maybe it was, now to have a French example, maybe it was different at La Cateau-Vassal studio, I don't know. But it could be that there you had this kind of, you were part of a kind of thing that you could share. But there I would really come back to also this kind of, we never talk about the labor, no, we always know, it's the ones that made it already in the magazines that are sitting in front, and then we could say, well, we are now the heroes because we are less whatever or more whatever. But in the end, it's that maybe that's something that we are working on now and we don't have the solution. So, but one part is, let's say, to hand over to everybody and to give it a multiple voice. And because in the end, it's about labor conditions. And the labor conditions in the field of architecture changed a lot. No, and it's also the ones, some I know, they're fighting so much now in this kind of having a project and not just doing a kind of service that's paid by more or less in the hour. Yeah, and that's maybe something we should also design and architect. How do we create our labor conditions within our own practices, but also, let's say, because in the end, if we would like to make this a grand projet, it's not that this four could do it, and we're sure with your help of the institution, but it would be a much bigger project. And then what does it mean, also economical-wise? And then, so what labor would you provide for what? Yeah, some is for the, let's say, the bread and butter, but is there possibilities to team up in something that's, That would be one of my open questions, and we are, let's say, maybe not yet at the result, but that's the topic we are into right now, because, and therefore, for sure, yeah, we have this kind of half-luxury situation. We also share with some that are here in the space at ETH Zurich, because, and we go there as guest workers, and with the exactly same reason. We are going there as guest workers because we are better paid than at home. And we can come home with the money and do projects or feed our family and then it's, but the other side is it so far that we already trapped into this guest working city? What does it mean to ourselves? So I would really claim for this labor discussion and
yeah, probably. I think when we're discussing we were trying to compare the not exact, sort of labor conditions. Beside all the links, the things that united the two offices. I mean, we had to admit that the situation we were starting from was very different, and we both very much adapt to this, try to respond to these conditions. And this idea that you need to develop your own project here because there's availability is very much linked to Berlin, and Berlin was sort of a breeding ground. We didn't have that chance. We'd love to. We're very fascinated by that, but we came from a different. We had the chance that in France we had a strong public policy for competitions and some structures to encourage young architecture, and that's how we came. And we have our old masters, and we knew what public architecture was about. But then, Nouvelle or La Cateau-Vassal, we knew how it could be, but we came later, 10, 15 years later, where there was the same idea of what you could do for the people and everything. Okay, but you didn't have the money anymore. So suddenly you had to reinvent something and that in between, you know, that's the change of, I mean, as you said, the condition changed a lot, and we had to adapt from within the system. I think, Arno, you put a step, you did step on the side, you went outside, you put yourself outside. We were within, because France has this strong public institution, and we did work from the inside. But I think it's very much linked to our respective national and urban, the way we were working at the time.
And maybe a consequence on the our architecture itself was maybe this the publicness of the buildings, and that even, I mean, okay, Saclay, it's a very public building, but even for housing projects and stuff like that, we're looking, I mean, how can we express the public side of such a building, a housing project? I mean, how do we express it? Is there exterior space? Do you see the people from the public space? I mean, what's the relation between the private and the public space? So it's really this question that kind of still is going on in most of the projects we're working now on. I mean, what's the public side of the building, and how do we express it? How do we emphasize it? How do we make people meet and interact?
I think that relates to Super Studio, if the or Archidome, if the world has become a great interior, we don't need any more domesticity. It's going to happen everywhere inside. It's full of Paris. It's full of signification. Meaning is everywhere. We've got too much of everything. So it's not what we're trying to look for now. Is exteriority. We want to be able to travel again. It's hard to travel. It's hard to go somewhere where that is really new, that is really wild. We're striving for. Architecture is not meant to build interiors anymore. I don't think so. We're trying to do searching for, I don't know, outsideness. Can you say exteriority? Something that strangeness? No, something that is not like us. We want more difference. You know. Yeah. I think so. That's why when doing a housing project, you should question domesticity. Do you need to? Do you need that? Maybe not. You'll always have something really inside. You always have an inside, but maybe that's not what we're looking for anymore.
I like that you bring that up, because I had a question about your images and your relation to images, and it came from that, but it actually relates much more to what you're saying now. It's a series of pictures by Luigi Gheri, which he did in '73, which he assembled himself in a small book. And Gheri is famously known for having been that great architecture photographer, working with Rossi, but not only. But here he was photographing maps and atlases and maps of the sky, etc. And he says that so that's kind of the only space left to travel. No? So he writes that in the 70s, and maybe it's very postmodern, Baudrillard kind of thinking, but he says that in a way the travels are not possible anymore. So it's done. Traveling is over. So where you can still travel is in signs and in images. I think this, in a way, connects back to what you were saying about this hyper-domesticity, but also...
We want to find desert islands. We want to find desert islands where you step, you're the first one.
That's very romantic.
Yeah, you live bare, you're just really naked. You have nothing but your iPhone. Of course, you kept your iPhone because you call your friends. You want to call your friends. It's so nice here. Please come. Oh, this huge mountain in the middle, and this water is so warm. So I think we're all dreaming of this situation when you can start again and bring your friends in. And of course, it's way too big inside. No, isn't it too big? The inside is bigger than the outside. The interiority is much wider because it's so tall. I'm thinking of one project in particular that we could see through the Zoom meetings, and I thought, when in a space that is so vertical, so high, you don't think the same way. You think differently. No, I'm sure. And that's what I mean by the condition of a desert island. Suddenly you can think differently, and architecture may do that, huh?
And would you say you think in images? Just maybe as a closing question, and then it would be very nice that we can open to the floor, I think, if you agree. But would you say, because it's quite striking in the Arc Plus now publication you did, huh? You start with a portrait that is a purely synthetic one, huh? And so we inhabit this world of images in which we do not know the status of images anymore, huh? And it's also the case with you, Muoto. I had to look twice because some of your renders are uncannily precise. No, there's even like the reflection on the laptop in the room behind the curtain. So there's this. It's obviously not a hyper reality as opposed to something that would be virtual. It's rather that it's all now everything at once. So I don't know if that's something you think about, the predominance of images. Do you live with them? Do you love them? Do you hate them? Do you want to kill them? How are you dealing with that? Or maybe you just don't think about images so much.
We like to do the extreme aspects of within the spectrum of images. We like the extremes. I think the most abstract thing when you don't know yet what lines mean, not yet, but you can feel something happening. You don't know if this line is it where you're going to put the walls, or I mean what size, or is it Jefferson grid, or you don't know yet. And on the other side, hyperrealism has something, I don't know.
I'm asking also because, sorry,
I don't know.
We just spent a year and a half talking to images, huh? Through screens, huh? So not to people, but to images of people. And so it's been our world for a year and a half now, no? We've been surrounded by images.
Yeah, but even, let's say, there were two things. We didn't talk to images, but the images were moving. And maybe that's a very important difference, because we can look at this now with a description, and we know that we see pixels and the kind of, and then they get like transparent and. But we are not longer living in an area of fixed images. There is the time vector, this kind of time-based media that's much more influential now, no? And even if we were sending photos in former times with this device, now it's films and it's. No, and you see all the social media that is much more about ongoing, and it's about the flu, and maybe that's something which is, let's say, indicating to us architects that the object, because if we describe it as something that's in time here, which is a fixed image, whether it's a render or not, it's over, because we need the space-time concept, no? It's a very old thinking, no, of Pauli and Jung and their quaternions, and to place it within a space-time continuum or whatever, but that is, and that's maybe something we have to learn, that it's all, and caretaking, for example, no, or is the time factor is important, and that's maybe an answer to how we deal with images.
So maybe you should make an unfinished image next time. And usually when you do rendering, sometimes just the sketch renderings, the wireframes are more interesting than the final result, because you still see the potential. I mean, you still have, a lot of possibilities when you just look at the wireframe. When you see the final rendering, which looks like a picture, like if have a photographer, really taking a picture of the non-existing building, I mean, then it's okay, it's finished. Mm-hmm. So I mean, that's something. We like to. Like Gilles said, we go from one side to the other side.
I think probably we're away from the fascination for images. I guess there was a moment. I think that doesn't work. I mean, we've done our super precise images from the very beginning, and there's a moment where we withdrew from it. We thought there's not much to get from it anymore. I don't think we are very much into representation, since we're, I guess, trying to come back before representation happens. But when Moises do a book, we're really happy with it. But I think that I don't think the concept of the image is so important. Probably we've gone to a capacity. There's so much capacity to produce any kind that is not so much inspiring. So much, I think. No, I don't know. The other processes that are probably more fascinating today.
Such as?
Sorry. Well, the ability to act on policies, for instance, that's, I mean, you don't necessarily have an image about it. It's very abstract. It's about a way of life, it's about society as a whole. For instance, where we can think of construction, there's some buildings, you know the details, you know the specific dimensions you need, because you know that within that space you can be able to do that several functions should work, but then you have no idea of the outside. It's somewhere else, and probably we do not necessarily work with an image because the image leads you to a specific project. So no.
Maybe to give a very banal, we will have elections, a very banal example, within 2 weeks. And it was really clear in the beginning, let's say 3 months ago, we all thought it's all clear. Will be the Conservatives, just ongoing. Then something changed. And there was one moment, let's say 3 weeks ago, the candidate of the Social Democrats, he's also the financial minister, so they had a meeting in Venice. And okay, as a side, in a little pause, they would like to visit the German pavilion. And okay, and then he said, okay, you came only because the biennial was closed for security reasons for all this important G20. And then he said, okay, you came and you spent so much time just to show me around for 1 hour, so you also get an hour from me. Okay, so we were sitting there. What would you like me to propose if I become chancellor? I think that's interesting, that you do something where you describe a world, how things made something better in a future that we don't know, but we could know, and that he got this idea, maybe that's embedded in the kind of, that every politician would like to do something better. And then we asked, okay, then the first thing we were claiming was we would like to have an independent ministry of building and housing, because it was eaten by the internal ministry, we make it bigger. So now it's not existing anymore. So it's not represented that building and housing has its own ministry. And then he said, I can agree to that. I said, okay, can you speak that in the phone right now? And that, okay. So and it looks now he will become the chancellor. So we already made a kind of ministry of building and housing, which was not existing the last, let's say, years. Then we have another, let's say, then I asked, well, that's getting a little bit complicated. He's the financial minister for the moment. So I said, why does housing need to pay VAT? So if we build a housing project, the price is including VAT. If we build an office building, an atelier building, whatever, we get the VAT back from the state. So, meaning to build a housing is 19%, I don't know how much it is here, 20 or something like that, 25. It's always 90% more expensive than office building, just because they say office buildings are part of a Wertschöpfungskette, of a value-making chain, and housing is not. And then I said, well, you see, but we have to live, otherwise we can't be productive. And don't tell us that housing is the end of a Wertschöpfungskette, of an evaluation system. Then he was like, okay, I approve. We will discuss that even in public, if you like, if I become chancellor. What would it mean? That housing would become 90% less expensive. And that's a lot, no, if you think of. So just to say, sometimes you have to grab the chance if you see it around the corner.
But is he not going to make the office buildings 20% more expensive to get more money? I mean, he's a smart guy, no? Probably.
He's a social democrat.
But then maybe grabbing their chance is great to open to the floor. So if anyone wants to grab their chance to ask questions or make comments or jump in, we have a microphone.
Thank you for the discussion. I had a question about identification, because you talked about liberty and democracy, and I was wondering, do you have reflections on the image that you create once the building is built? And for instance, Saclay is standing alone in the middle of a great plaza in the middle of the city, so it will have a great impact not only on the users but also on the people who live in the city. And do you have a reflection on the way people can identify to a building, or on the way a building can have a meaning for the people who live near it but not inside it, or even if they don't use it?
If you take the architectures that are the symbols of the darkest political systems, the most authoritarian systems, and the buildings that are the symbols of the most liberal and democratic systems, if you look at these two architectures, they're very much the same. So we're not thinking of it. I think the same building can say one thing and the other. I'm thinking of neoclassical architecture. Well, it's the symbol of very different political systems, and changes according to the country, the culture, and the period of history. So somehow it's very. I think that the thing that you're talking about is very relative. It's really hard to grasp. So it's a bit of a choice not to sort of carry about.
As it was announced as a versus evening, no, I don't agree. So let's say we nasty Germans, no, after Second World War, coming back, we invented something, no, that glass transparency is something that's showing us a new light, that everything is, you can see, no. So this was in Brussels, the World Fair. It was maybe the first building all just of glass and then metal, and then also the German Bundestag in Bonn. It's very glass to indicate that we are different than the Albert Speer before. So I would stay, and people would always look into the parliament, no? And this makes a difference. Oh, just as a joke at the end, no?
We'll discuss that.
And also, let's say, also to claim one of our, let's say, examples, it's about arguments that you provide, and in the best case, the neighbors and others could use it as their own weapon. No, then it's changing. I'm not talking about maybe this aesthetic, whatever, to feel closer or a neighborhood thing. It's not maybe our, let's say, competence. But we did this one building where we just smashed in openings because they were too small. And funny-wise, there were two cases where people tried it in a kind of rental apartment and it caused problems. But I think that's nice, no? That this kind of self-empowerment is a kind of argument, a kind of narrative that people could share. And mainly what was coming up, we wanted to put this on the agenda, that mostly these old half-ruined buildings are not the very nice ones. No, the nice ones are kept and well maintained, and after it made it on some magazines on the title, then people, although in the surroundings, started to say, okay, this ugly, let's say, hut I have in the backyard, no, I will go on with that. No, that it's not an aesthetic question, but maybe just to revalue it differently. And that's something I think you can provide, no? And even your buildings will do that. No, it's not only about the use, that they can go there and have basketball, but they would think, well, it's nice to have space that's so huge and it's undefined, and no, and what does it mean for the surrounding? And no, it's, I believe in this power of architecture to be an argument.
Yes, I agree. I mean, it's not that there is no meaning, that the thing is meaningless. I didn't mean that, but meaning changes. So, you know.
Yeah, but it makes an argument for the time being in the discussion as it goes, I guess. No, that's a little bit my understanding now of. So probably.
And
so
good arguments change the contemporaneity, so they change the now. So it's maybe then in 50 years not about the building that provided the argument, but about a slight change as what was argumented into the surrounding, and the wider it is, it maybe has less influence, but I believe in that.
Hello. My question is, as you have spent, as I understood, several weeks regularly interacting, have you perhaps discovered something that you interestingly disagreed upon and productively, and something could come out of that?
Yesterday they ordered a plate as a starter that was full of meat. And it was completely normal.
There are many things. No, but we're too polite to disagree. We're too civilized, probably. I don't know.
But one that was described also about the conditions, no, for sure there was a kind of luxury moment, a very hedonistic luxury moment in Berlin where, let's say, living costs were really low. And the quality of life was really high at the same moment, no? And that creates, that was a difference, and you can still trace it to all our projects. So there are differences, for sure. And maybe it's something that you here lived since decades, but housing prices, and for us it's, especially in the Berlin situation, maybe not in Munich, but it's rather new, no? So.
I would say in your questions, there's this idea that we may have to agree, or we did agree. We were talking about agreements, and we talked about that yesterday about Switzerland, how people tend to find an agreement from the very beginning. They meet each other and they discuss, and you know that you will have to find a consensus. The thing I think we never discussed about agreeing. The project, because there was a project to be done, was never an objective. So we never asked, do you agree? I don't think it was really a discussion about having to find a final agreement. So I don't think there were disagreements. I think the way remained quite unclear as long as it could, probably. No.
And before, let's say, meeting for this kind of invitation here, we 2 times applied together for competitions. We never were invited, and I would be sure working together on something. But that would be the interesting part, no? Though this was a warming up.
It's promising. It's promising. Your first commission, no?
I mean, we never disagreed because we never designed a project. I mean, that's the important thing. We were just discussing and telling stories. I like to go to the Mont Blanc, and I like to run around it. And then we talked about Viollet-le-Duc. I mean, he did the studies about, the Mont Blanc, the ruin, and Viollet-le-Duc. Then we talked about Notre Dame, and then it just went on. I mean, we didn't talk about what should we do in 3 months, in the cité on the half pipe. I mean, that we never talked about, and that's the thing. And I think if we had disagreement, it would have been maybe just a starting point, just to move on and discussing something else. So we never had a problem.
Maybe it's the wrong discussion when you disagree. Maybe because you said we didn't have to design, and it's true that you never have to design, but even though it's not architecture, you may try to escape this question of design because you were talking about the collaborative way of working, and necessarily you try to find other protocols to work together. And of course, if there's one in the middle who designs, everybody will be against that one who decides for the rest of
yeah,
them.
but also to say, if you look in this compound books, we will leave them here somewhere, they have to, that people can, it's not so far away. No, and I would know a lot of colleagues, I would always get into fight. No, I think that's completely clear. So just to make a French example, the very early Jean, no, the Nemours project, I would agree, or the shit he's doing now is, no, we would, I'm younger now, so.
Does it work? Yeah. About the publicness of a building, which is very interesting for me. So I'm a Berlin-based architect in a residency here in Paris. So I'm trying to learn about this new French realism, and I'm walking a lot around and trying to visit buildings, and I'm always regularly get thrown out because I don't have the right to visit or to enter into the buildings. And Arno, I know from your terrace house that your client is sometimes at the verge of a nervous breakdown because too many people want to enter, so she's hiring a doorman to prevent that people don't enter. So is this is this public space in that private place, is that something you negotiate actively with your clients, and do you fix it in a contract, or do you negotiate that?
To come back with that example, he's talking about the terrace house, and then the dear client mounted a door to get in the backyard. And that's really demolishing. It's really, let's say, that's something I cannot accept. I could accept that any other architect would build extensions to it, but to cut the publicness, that's a crime to the attention. So what do we learn out of that? You have to, and you can't contract it now, because then you have to go to court. You have to even embed this experience into a next project, that you can't fence it off. And there's a very nice example, if you go to Ivry, no? I'm a huge fan of René Gaisdet, and the difference to Renaudie. In her case, the gardens are always private, no? In her buildings, because she said that's about use and about the quality in life, and his terraces are much more public, no? And in the first you think it looks very the same, but then it becomes a real difference. But then on the other hand, like spending even, let's say, days and days and days in this environment, and talking to her and talking to her and talking to her with a translator, because she's... It was very interesting that sometimes the private argument of the private gardens might have the chance to win over the publicness, which I would argue for in her case, because there is a kind of maintenance and caretaking also in the public, and maybe there we have to train something. I'm not already sure about that, but...
Yeah, but I mean, publicness is sort of a condition. I mean, it's not that, I mean, more generally, I would say things can be closed and public. I mean, maybe we're making a separation too clear between publicness and privateness. It's maybe more of a condition that we're striving for. And of course, it's negotiable. In Saclay, we wanted, of course, the way up to be open 24 hours a day. That's always what we've always said. The building was open, could only be open 24 hours a day, and of course, the client didn't want to. So what we said we closed down the stair at the bottom, knowing that, you know, in order to go to the first floor, it's about 3 meters, and any basketball player can jump on it. But not everybody will be able to go. You have to be big enough, but that's okay if they're basketball players. So we negotiated, and you get something different. I mean, okay, it's closed, but then with a little effort, you can still climb the building.
To scale it up, We don't have, let's say, in the house a private door, and also the Berlin block always would have a door, and we would like to avoid that. And you can scale it up. Would we go for, let's say, for a kind of protection for Schengen borders? No, it's just the upscaling of it, and I would be for a radical opening for sure. No, but then we also have to live with that and to stand it, no? And there's a moment, I don't know yet how to bring Schengen down. But you could also bring it to the American-Mexican wall, all this kind of fencing, no? I think it's not okay. But
also, each of these projects they're not absolute models. I mean, I don't know for you. We don't mean every building in the city should be like this one. They're alternatives, and that's good enough to have an alternative of people who may want. No, that's in terms of housing. That's the problem we see. We're talking also about buildings. You can move the partitions and stuff, and say, what do you want flexible? What do you want to change your flat? You should just have the choice to live in different flats, because today all flats are the same, We have the same model applying to the entire France, Everybody, this 3-room flat, it's everywhere the same, from the north to the south. So what do you want to make them flexible? They're all the same. So wherever you're going to live, you will live in the same flat. So what you need are just alternatives. You need flats that are different from the others, and that's what we can try to propose. I would say your terrace building is an alternative. Is as opposed to to its context, and I think you cannot fight that. You don't have to live in there. If you don't like it, live in a different one. No, I would say.
So, yeah, I think we need to close. Unfortunately, we could go on for hours, but...
I have to tell something official as, let's say, for institutions like here, the apéro after the drinks, the really important part after discussion, couldn't be provided. Therefore, there's some cold beer bottles outside behind the little wall, and you are all invited. They're cold. And you don't need glasses that have to be cleaned. No, you will have so this one. And we would provide you, so they look like this. And anybody who would like to have a personal, let's say, tape on it, we would be happy to serve you.
Bravo, bravo. I'm sorry, but we have to stop now. But anyway, I would like to thank you very frankly about this very tonic warm-up, as you said. And I hope you will team up together on a larger scale project in France, maybe, or in Germany, or maybe elsewhere. Anyway, you're invited to come back, and I'm not sure the Air Force will be there once more. I'm not sure, but we can try to, we will invent something. Yeah. And thank you for this installation of with your grid that offers a new reading of the space here. So that's transformation, and that's maybe the word. And so thank you, and now I skip back to French. Bon, merci à vous.
So thank you very much to all of you who came tonight. We've been very happy, as the chairperson said, to be with you again and live, face-to-face, in the flesh, and come back. They are going to imagine a program for the 3 coming months, and then we'll start on new ground with housing and building, as we have said. So I'm telling you good night, and thank you again, and see you very soon.